Wait.
No, I'm happy to make a start.
Okay, right, good afternoon, everybody. It's been a real test of my own personal resilience this afternoon because my neighbour decided that she was going to have her garden dug up and landscaped today. So at the back of my house, there are diggers in the garden, and at the front of my house is the skip where all the soil and the debris is going. So some of the things we're going to talk through this afternoon, I've gone through today thinking about how best I can block out the noise for you. So hopefully, I've set it with Ellie, there is no noise coming through, but you never know. Some of you may be on this call and have your own children coming in as well. So we just have to deal with things the best way we can. So my name's Paula Ashby and I have a business called Professional Development People, but I work alongside Optamor on a range of courses with a range of clients, hence offering this for you today. I'm a trainer, I'm a coach, and I'm a cognitive behaviour therapist. And I feel really strongly with whichever subject we're looking at, it's about cognitive reframing. What we're trying to do is use psychological techniques to identify and change the emotions we have, the situations we find ourselves in. For example, everybody knows the strategies for time management, but there are things that stop us doing those strategies. And it's the same with most situations we find ourselves in. And what happens is our emotions get the better of us. That does not mean to say our fears are not real. They are very real at the moment, but it's about how we can control that. And part of the way we do that is through developing our personal resilience. Okay, so what I want to do, you know there's going to be questions at the end. Please can you make sure you're muted, or Ellie may mute you all, because otherwise the session will be very short because there'll be lots of back and forth and then you don't get the information. I'm treating this as a proper training session, so you should get content out of it. And then you'll be sent you'll be sent the slides afterwards. But I want you to use this time to think about yourself or your team or your family. Okay, so if we have a look at the first slide, it's thinking about possible challenges. We've been in lockdown for some of us since the 20th of March. My daughter has been home from school, so anybody with kids has been home. Some of you may have been home that long, or it may have been you've been asked to go on furlough for 3 or 4 weeks. It may be you've been asked to take holiday. It may be you're part of the skeleton crew that is trying to work through this. Every way is stressful. And what I'd like to do is ask you the sorts of challenges you may have had as a result of lockdown. But I don't want you to tell me, I want you to note them down on your piece of paper, please. Note down some of the challenges you have had as a result of lockdown. This is where you can write an absolute ream. When you're writing reams, what this means is you're stuck in the problem phase rather than moving on. So I want you to identify some challenges. We're going to look at some, and then we're going to move on from there into thinking about what can we do to develop our resilience to deal with them. So if you want to stop writing your challenges and have a look at some of these and see if some of these have come up for you. So the first one may be dividing time between work and home commitments, because let's face it, it's a challenge at the best of times. You know, when you're at work and you bring work home. When you're at home, if you're trying to work from home, the dishwasher needs to be put on, or washing needs to be done. We're trying to do chores at the same time. When you're both at home, if you're with a partner, if you are with a flat share with friends, then actually there is 2 of you thinking the other person could be doing that. If you're on your own, it's more difficult because you're feeling guilty that you're not doing some of the home chores when you're at home, or that you're stopping to do something, and yet work, the email streams are coming through over and over again. So that can be a real challenge for us. The second one may be arguments. So what happens is if the dishwasher's not been loaded, that becomes a massive thing. Because nowadays what you're having to do, there's not enough rooms necessarily. So one of you is working in the kitchen. So the breakfast things that are on the table, it's a real problem for you. So the trivial things blow up and become big things. Trying to get, I have my own child, and listening to colleagues who have children, trying to get your children settled to study so you can start work may have initially been the problem. They're now in that routine. The problem now is they finish before you, or they finish because they have a break and they want a snack. and you're not in that point, and that becomes a bigger issue. So arguments brew. Homeschooling, childcare. So homeschooling, different schools are doing things in different ways. We are getting on with it, or we're struggling with it. And now at the end of this week, we have half term, and then we have the summer holidays. And what we would normally have is clubs, after school clubs, holiday clubs. We'd have grandparents, we'd have friends, we'd have play dates, we'd have things to entertain our children, to educate our children, and we don't have that now. So along with the household issues, the work commitments, we've also got the childcare issues. That can be a challenge for us. Another one to look at, and this is for a lot of people, is that you have friends and family that you care about who you can no longer see because you're having to self-isolate, and so are they, and you may be a risk to them. And what this then means is that you worry about, are they eating properly? Are they seeing anybody? Are they lonely? What about family members who are in care homes? You can't get to see them, in hospital, who aren't very well. So that can be a real challenge for us. If you're part of a team or you're leading a team, you may feel disconnected from what your colleagues or your own team are doing. It may be that you are misinterpreting, or you feel that the messages coming across to you are different to normal, because you may usually communicate face to face, and now it's via Zoom, it's via Teams, it's via WhatsApp. It's different ways, phones, and actually people's communication styles are different. We may be used to communicating in a certain way, and suddenly in this new format, we're not getting the same feeling from them, and not getting the same messages. And we begin to put the phone down or come off the call and think, what does it mean? Why are they're talking differently? Are they feeling unhappy about something? You begin to doubt yourself and what you're doing. There's lots of issues about colleagues and teams and how much a part of it you are. It may be the other way, where you're supposed to do a coffee at 9 o'clock, you're supposed to do lunch together, and then something in the evening, as well as, let's face it, your Zoom quizzes and your drinks after work and things like that. So actually it might be there's too much, but you're feeling under pressure to do it. You may actually be very like me, where I'm a face-to-face person. I'm a coaching person, I'm a training person. I am learning all sorts of IT networks. You may find that your IT networks, your Zooms or your Teams, do not support remote working. You haven't got enough computers, you don't have enough systems, your broadband width is not enough for the school work that you're doing as well. So it's really trying to think about how do you manage those systems, because let's face it, you have done all of the challenges that are listed so far, you are managing, because you're on this call and you're having to cope with these things, or some of these things. Having no real structure to your day. If you're used to commuting, however short the distance, you are getting up at a certain time every day, you're going to work every day, you're there for a certain period of time every day, and then you're coming home. Now, you could work all day in your pajamas from bed if you wished, eating bananas. So actually, if you don't have a structure, it makes it much more difficult to finish your working day. It makes it much more difficult to get things done. And having no structure can lead to this challenge, where it's difficult to focus on task and engage, and what you do is you procrastinate. You don't get things done, you feel frustrated. And linked to that, if you have no structure and you can't focus, then you're always firefighting and reactive, and that's exhausting. So I'm hoping that some of these challenges you have put down on your sheet. What I want you to notice is some of them have a little asterisk next to them. And the reason for that is because the course is about developing personal resilience, which means you have some. And the reason I put asterisks here is because you may feel this was a challenge, but is no longer. So actually, you have divided your work and home commitments. You have found a space to work. You have organised who's going to cook dinner and go shopping and household stuff. Your kids are plugged into homeschooling. You are able to link in with all of these systems, and your colleagues and teams know, you know what you're doing. So if you're actually at the stage where you finish on the 20th of March, or your kids do, so some of you may have to, or the week after, you may be doing really, really well. And what I'd like you to do on your sheet of paper is note that if there are some aspects that you actually feel were challenges, but you are or have begun to or have got that working smoothly, note it down. It's really important that you note those down. The other thing linked to this is any of those asterisk areas may now become a strength. So if you were very weak in terms of Zoom and Teams or had no knowledge at all, and now actually it's a strength, note that down. You've turned a challenge into something really, really positive, and it's important that you recognize that, and you can shout it from the rooftops, really, because when you're feeling that other things are on top of you, it's really important that you understand where you are strong and can go back to that place. Okay, so hopefully what you've got, some of you, is challenges that you're now beginning to go, I'm over that, or I'm beginning to work with that. If you're on this call, you're recognizing that you are needing something, and that in itself is a positive. Okay, as part of the challenges, you will experience a number of emotions. Oh dear, what's going on here? So, can you note down the emotions you're feeling at the moment, please, on your sheet of paper? If you feel that you're being challenged on your homework commitments and your homeschooling and you're not sure how to have structure in your day, they will evoke emotions. So note down some of the feelings you may be having. And linked to the asterisks, also link down some of the positive feelings you might be having. Okay, let's have a look. Guilt. How do you divide our time between our children and our work? Guilt. How do you divide our time between our team members? Frustrated. The internet's gone down, the systems aren't particularly working, colleagues are not getting back to you. As a manager, you thought you laid out things clearly to your staff in this new way, but you're not having responses from them. They're not meeting deadlines. Confused. What should you be doing now? Does it matter if something isn't working the way it usually does? Anxious. I was exactly like that, feeling anxious when I was listening to my neighbour's diggers going up and down outside. You might be angry at the situation. Certainly recognising one person on the call, the amount of press there has been about education at the moment, I imagine that quite a few people within education are feeling very angry, and from that will come confusion and anxiety. Because are you doing the right thing, are you not? People tell you different things. So there's a whole range of emotions. Helpless. A lot of us feel helpless, especially if we've got people that are living away from us or people that are sick. You might be tearful, depending on the situation you're in. Lonely if you're actually self-isolating on your own. We talked earlier about families, negotiation. If you're on your own, it can be a very lonely place and a very lonely time. And for some people, they're feeling lost. However, others are feeling enjoyment. So if you actually are enjoying not doing that commute, I often will work in London. I am really glad I'm not getting up at 5:30 in order to get that 6:10 train, ferry to go across the train to go up to London. You're enjoying being with your kids, you're enjoying being with your family, you're enjoying doing things in the evening without strict timelines. And what you might do is also be feeling gratitude for the simpler things in life, going for your daily walk, enjoying the sunshine. We've had really good weather during this lockdown time. Being able to get into the garden, being able to sit on your balcony if you're in a flat, being able to listen to music, doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And sometimes we've gone back to the simpler things, which have allowed us to slow down our pace of life and perhaps spend more time talking to people that we've lost touch with than we used to do. So what I wanted to do at this beginning is ask you to think about challenges and some emotions you might be feeling. And the reason for that is this webinar is going to go through 3 main areas of personal resilience and how to help you recognise what you're doing and therefore develop it. And in order to be able to do that, you needed to understand that we cannot stay in that negative place. So the challenges, if you begin to overcome them, if you're beginning to recognise that some of the emotions you're feeling may be positive as well, and you may have enjoyment and gratitude, but also guilt, or also some helplessness. But the fact that you can recognise some of those positive points means that your personal resilience is alive and well and kicking. So what I want to do is just show you the key things I want to work on in this webinar with you to do with aspects of personal resilience that I want you to focus on. So if you are able to remain positive when you're faced with change, and this has been a huge change for everybody, there's not been anybody unaffected by this. If you can remain positive when faced with that change and uncertainty, then your personal resilience is good. You're working well, you can build on it. For most of us, that is too big a step. And when we're faced with lockdown, we couldn't see where to go. And part of the reason for that is because we're always watching the media. The news is on all the time. When you go on the computer in the morning, as soon as you go onto anything to put in a Google search or to put into your email address and to log on, there is the latest death rates. It draws you in all the time, and it's always negative, whether it's about NHS, whether it's about education, whether it's about the government. So it's quite hard to have that. The other part I want to look at under personal resilience for this situation, lockdown, is being able to adapt. Now, because this half an hour webinar is very short, we talked about the psychological reframing of our mind. This is an introduction to get you moving. So what I would say at this stage is, although personal resilience is about being able to adapt to the changing situation, I would really like you to understand your thoughts and how you move those thoughts, because that allows you to make practical steps to adapting to the situation. So we've gone through phase 1, which was lockdown. We're looking at, and then phase 2 was this, everybody being here, and phase 3 is now businesses going back to work and education starting and people moving out of the house. That adapting, that practical physical movement out of the house may be terrifying for some people, some of your staff, for some of you on this call. So we need to get that emotional stage first. This is the one I'm talking about. So I've talked to a lot of colleagues and friends who have staff who are having panic attacks at the thought of coming back to work, at the thought of how safe it's going to be, at the thought of taking things home to their family, this awful disease. So if you are able to overcome that, if you're able to work with your staff to ask them how they're feeling, to ask them what can be put into place, or remind them what's been put into place in your workplace, in your sphere of where they're going to be, that can help allay people's fear and help them to be calm and in control of their behaviour and their emotions. So it's really important that we focus on that. If you are able to adapt and being positive, you can be productive. There is no point being at work if you're not productive. That's that whole procrastination thing we've looked at earlier, we mentioned. It's about being productive. It's getting through your day, because at the end of the day, if you're productive, then what you do is you feel pleased. Pleasure, relief, happiness, they're positive emotions that again build us up to allow us to go back to work tomorrow. So when we were thinking about lockdown, for those of you who are not able to go to work, who find this too tough, it's about getting out of bed. It's about getting dressed. It's about actually having meals. It's about having shopping delivered if you can't go to the supermarket. But it's being productive in the tasks that you're choosing to do, maybe doing some gardening, whatever it is you're going to do, but getting through them. And that means that actually your emotional state is a good one. Once you're out and about, doing whatever you're doing, so you've been in lockdown all the time, you've had shopping home delivered, and you've now got to think about going to the shops. If you can recognize when you're becoming stressed, we're going to look at this in a minute, that's a really good step to begin to control your behavior and calm yourself down. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about a CEO having staff coming back to work or somebody who's isolated on their own and struggling to actually leave the house. Any of you on this call, it's for you. If you can recognize when you're becoming stressed, then you're in your first stages of dealing with it. Because if you recognize it, then guess what? We can look at acting to limit and negate that stressful situation. That does not mean going back to bed. That does not mean coming up with a excuse for not going to work. It's recognizing to yourself what is the key problem and then looking at ways in which you can limit and negate that. And it may be questioning what situation is at work, what is in place. It may be talking to somebody about how you're feeling. It may be finding strategies to calm yourself down. If you've got a pet, stroking the cat, reading a book, listening to music. It's trying to find things that work for you to keep yourself calm and take your mind away from that situation. Because the key thing is, resilience can be learned and developed like any other skill. A lot of the work I do is with mental health, and it's with people who are suffering from anxiety, depression, nervous breakdowns, and find it difficult to be at work or have been bullied. So this is why I'm trying to go that full range, because when you are very, very stressed, it doesn't matter how important, how high up your position is, how much money you have the same feelings. So it's being aware of what to do. So the 3 key areas, I'm checking the time, is how to manage your resilience in general. You've got to try to accept things you can't change. And we're going to look at that and what that means, because it's really easy to say and it's hard to do. We've got to be positive in our actions. We just talked a lot about that, and managing our time. Okay, so let's have a look at those. The first thing I want to do is to think about what is it we can do to act positively and focus on things that we can control. What we actually have here is a very simplified version of something put together by Stephen Covey in 7 Habits of Effective People. When the pandemic started, most of us were thinking and talking about being here. It was, will there be a second wave? Will my job still be there at the end of this? Can the kids go back to school, etc., etc., etc. You will have a whole range of things because you put them under your challenges. You put them under your emotions. You may not have said the words, but those things have brought those to the fore. So what we need to do with your challenges is think about, are they concerns outside your control, or actually are you able to deal with all of those challenges? Because if these are concerns, these are all concerns outside my control. I don't know what government's going to decide, and nor do schools. I don't know enough about my company. I'm not high enough up to know about the top up with the furlough payments. We don't know what's going to happen. Is it going to go above 1 or not? So these things, we waste a lot of energy. These things are on the news all the time. These things, what we talk to people about, we have no control. And in order to begin to take control, we have to think about some of the things that we can influence. And some of the things we can influence is the conversations that we have with people. Is it always negative? Is it only about the pandemic? Some of the, how much news we watch. Can we cut down? Can we only watch the headlines? The key thing is this center. What is it I can control? And for some of you, the things that you can control are only what's in your house. So it might be when you get up, what you eat, where you work in your room. It might be very small things, but the biggest one there is the challenging and negative emotions. So one of the questions you need to ask is what you're feeling real? I'm going to look at that the next time, at the next slide. What I mean by that is, if the news is telling you all of this, then you know that there is a pandemic, you know you have to take precautions. You can control some of those precautions. You can control if you go out or not, to a certain extent, depending on what your job is. You can control wearing a face mask and washing your hands. You can control those negative emotions to actually question actually, if I'm doing these things, if I am 2 meters away, if I've got my face mask, if I'm washing my hands, that thought that's happening, I can challenge that, which is very, very different to these things. What we can do with these things is we can avidly try to work out the figures and what's happening. We can stress with our boss, you know, what's going on. We can ask him for information, but we still can't control it. So the key thing for remaining positive and focusing on control are the bits in here. So can you very briefly on your sheet of paper find a box, make it as big as you want, and in that box write what I can control. Come up with maybe 5 things that you can control that is meaningful to you. So a box on that sheet, 5 things that you can control. Because if you can control them, then you're in a positive state of mind. Going back, if you think back to the slide I had earlier, which is remaining positive, you're saying I can control these things. So straight away, by actually putting your pen to paper and writing what I can control, you are challenging negative emotions just by doing that activity. So you're remaining positive. You are recognizing that you can limit or negate some of the stressful situations you're finding yourself in. So already you're developing that positive resilience. Okay, so changing those and challenging those negative emotions. Right, what I want to do, again, this is very, very brief, but this, as I said, this session is about a real training session for you. It's not highlights with a picture of a bell and then I'm talking, you're trying to scribble loads and loads of notes to understand what I'm saying. The notes you're making are about your situation now. So what you have is cognitive behavior therapy, negative behavior cycle. When you are thinking about things that you can't do, when you're in that negative spiral, and you're focusing on things that you can't control, what tends to happen is you go in a circle. And in order to develop your resilience, you need to understand what that negative behavior circle is and then how to break it. So if you take one of mine, which was leading a team meeting remotely or leading training remotely at the beginning, my first thought was, I can't do it. And my second thought was, I don't want to do it. And my third thought was, I won't do it. And what happens is I then say to a lot of the businesses I work with, well, let's have a look at when's the earliest we have to come back. What can we do face-to-face? Can we do a WhatsApp? How do we work this? And what was interesting is I was trying to carry on that negative behavior cycle. And what happens is people turn around and say, oh, maybe Paula, yeah, we can do coaching on that, but training, no, it needs to be bigger. We can't do face-to-face for a long time. So what you have to begin to do is think, how do I get out of it? Because otherwise I'm not going to be working at all. So the very fact I'm saying, how do I get out of it, meant I broke that negative behavior cycle here. For most of us, what tends to happen is you have a thought, and as soon as you have the thought about the issue you're thinking on, your body responds and you have feelings around it. So with me, it was anxiety. What happens if I can't do IT, if it all goes horribly wrong? I've now learned to do Zoom and Teams. I've never learned to do it through a company. And the fact that somebody at Optamor has control of it, it made me anxious. So what I'm then doing is, if you're having those thoughts which are leading to anxious feelings, is your body thinks, my gosh, I've got to go into fight or flight. And what happens is you get bodily responses, heart racing, palpitations, shortness of breath. You might feel dizzy. You might feel exhausted. You might not be able to sleep. There's all sorts of things that can happen. And what happens is this goes around, this feeds this feeds this, and they go round and round, and you can start anywhere. So Paula, you've got to lead a team meeting. My first thing I may notice is not a thought, it's a feeling, which is anxiety. So my body goes, oh, I've got to respond to it, which then makes me think I can't do it. Whichever way it is, what you need to do is recognize these things happening, because the minute you recognize these things happening, You halt the process, and it's like cutting through here. So if you think, I can't do it, you're then thinking, where's the evidence? What's the worst that can happen if I try? Because if you don't stop, what will happen is it will go round and you don't do it. It'll impact on your behaviour. I've got to go back to work. I'm feeling anxious. I'm having panic attacks. I've got shortness of breath. My brain's going numb. I don't know how to do it. It's not going to be safe. I phone in sick. So this can happen to any members of your staff. The things I'm showing you are tools you can use with any members of your staff outside of lockdown, when people are feeling anxious or they're not able to do tasks and they're putting up barriers and they're procrastinating. Okay, so the first one was very much focusing about what you can control and influence, at the very least influence. The second one is about recognizing the negative behavior cycle. I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to push on. Linking to this, it's a very long slide, which is why you're going to get it, but it's very important, is recognizing that actually you can have, if you're getting that negative behavior cycle, you can also have distorted thinking styles. And this is linked to, you're working in different ways now. So you're having conversations with people, we said earlier, in different ways, you're communicating in different ways. So you're beginning to think about, how do you take messages and distort them yourself? So it might be that you're filtering, and what you're doing is you only think about their negative details and you're magnifying them. So if I go back to work, I'll be the one who gets coronavirus. My workplace isn't thinking about, I've been asked to go back, but there's no more hand sanitation stations. So what you're doing is there's no positives, there's no actually got people to talk to, we can have regular breaks, it's all the negatives. Here, the black and white, I can't do it. There's no middle ground, you're either good or a failure. So the pieces of work you used to be able to do very well face to face, you're not so good on webinars, you're not so good in leading meetings on webinars or online. Where is the evidence for that? Why can't you be learning the same as everybody else? You become hard on yourself. I'm not going to go through them all because you can do this yourself. This is a key one where we think everything is around us. We're comparing ourselves to how others are doing. So a lot of people that I know, mothers who are working full time and also doing the childcare, are saying to me, I've come off social media. And I've come off social media because every time you look at it, all it is somebody's painted their shed, somebody's decorated a room, somebody's built a bird box with their child during homeschooling. And actually, you compare yourself and you think, I'm rubbish. I can't do any of those things. It's not always about you. It's about thinking, what is it that you can do? Distorted thinking, recognizing when this is happening. So if you go down that line, that negative cycle, you will get, that we looked at earlier, if you don't control your thinking, if you continue to respond physically, your body responds to the stress, you're going to be poorly, you're catastrophizing. And what we tend to do then is we blame. We blame other people, we blame ourselves, we're not being objective. So last bit, there was 3 things I said to you. The 3 things about controlling what you can, thinking about your emotions and your behavior in the negative cycle and the distorted thinking, and thinking about your time. Because we said about procrastination, we said about putting together a timetable, and firefighting. So plan your diaries if you're going to work. And in order to do that, you would have to break large tasks into smaller manageable pieces. You have deadlines at work. So how would you normally meet that deadline? What are the steps you would do? How would you break things down? What's important, what's urgent in terms of your tasks to meet those deadlines? Include gaps, so you've got flex. So if you're working from home, you don't have the commute. So think about how can you build some flex in for emergencies so you're not firefighting? How can you influence other people? How can you empower staff so they're doing things? Can you recognize when you have become a control freak and everything has to be done by you and you alone? Because if you can recognize that, you can begin to get people to do things Think about the flexibility you need for your staff to contact you, because everybody needs to speak to people. They're not sure what to do using a new format. They need time to talk, but you will need some flex time within your timetable to allow those conversations to be part of your work, your work. Okay, they can't be fit in around and above your work. So you've got your structured day and time with colleagues. The reason I've got this in there is because you want to be checking with colleagues. So it's not just about the tasks, it's about checking how they are emotionally. So that when you are thinking about people coming back to the workplace, they know this is happening and you know how they're feeling. So you can actually be saying to them, from the conversation we had last week when we had our 10-minute coffee chat, you said you weren't feeling so anxious. So you can be using this bit, not this bit, which is about the actual task people may be struggling with, but this bit to do that emotional checking with them. Thinking about emotional checking, you need to have time in your working day for yourself. At work, you would go to the toilet, you would go for a coffee, you would hang around the photocopy having a chat with people, you would have a lunch time of some sort. You might be something after work. I know people that are working till midnight. You shouldn't be doing that. You need to have some time for yourself. If you're working different hours and longer hours because of the situation where people are coming back to work, you still need some time to yourself. If it's going for your walk, reading your book, doing some sort of exercise, you need something. And then you need to be reviewing how you're feeling at the end of the task, at the end of the day. How has today been for you? If you're utterly exhausted, then it's going back to that control cycle. What is it that you're feeling out of control on? If it's just too much work, then you need to be thinking, if it's too much work, who do you need to talk to? How much pressure are you putting on yourself, and how much pressure has been put on you by other people? And can you have those conversations? And that's a whole new different webinar around assertiveness. Okay, keep doing that. And lastly, you need to have social time, because your head does need to be out of work. So I'm aware of the time. We started slightly late, but we're 8 minutes over. So what I would like you to do is, in summary, what we've looked at is challenges that are currently facing us in lockdown, and we need to control those because they're things that we can nothing down. They bring us down. They bring our personal resilience down. There are our feelings and emotions around our lives in lockdown, and that negative behaviour cycle. The distorted thinking, we're not seeing things clearly. We're seeing things through our emotions rather than through facts. We're not dealing with facts by being assertive and questioning and challenging. We're going into that downward spiral. And about putting structure into our day. That's going to help with our time management, in feeling as though we're getting through our work and feeling on top of things and stopping procrastination. So hopefully what we've done today is begun to get you in a very short period of time. You've got a sheet with challenges on, emotions that you're feeling, and within that I've asked you to begin to think about how you've overcome or begun to overcome some of those challenges. So some of those emotions are positive, and you've got a box on there that is where you've put up to 5 things that you have control over. So already you are on that journey of developing. And I want to leave you with this quote. Persistence and resilience only comes from having been given the chance to work through difficult problems. This time we're in now is probably the most difficult of our lifetime, all of our lifetimes, but we are getting through it. In some way, we are getting through it. We are hopefully being supported by people or supporting others. You have some tips there. I really want you to look at the paper after this and think, where are you going to go next?